Good afternoon, everyone. 3 on a very, very hot day. Now, I have done something quite unusual because normally what I do is I just start a video, I just sort of open the camera, and as you know, I talk a stream of consciousness and just wherever that takes me. But I've been working outside in this blazing heat, but I've actually been working down amongst the trees. So I've got the doors open at the moment. I've just come in. Well, I came in actually about 10 minutes ago. Been drinking some juice. I've made some juice with beetroot and whatnot. So I'm feeling re-energised. And whilst I was out there working, I thought, yeah, I need to tell this story a little bit. So I'd already come up with a title for this video before I actually picked up the camera. And the title of the video, as of course you can see, is Climate Change, 15 Years of Adaptation. Because I can't do enough about getting this message out. Now, stay with me. You're probably thinking, I've heard this message before, but I want to show you what I've been doing, okay? And hopefully you'll be able to see what's possible. Now, I know those of you who are familiar with Bealtaine Cottage already know what's possible. Jack is laying in the shady corner. But I've just been opening up pathways. And I knew that when I started on this pathway here, reopening it, that it would be taking me down the steps and down into what was the last little bit of lawn, what I used to call for several years my homage to the lawn. Now, just before I start, I've got plants wilting all over the place because the heat is tremendous. I think it's about 29 or 30 centigrade, which is about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. It's very hot here for the west of Ireland. This is our third drought, my third drought here. I really feel as though I can speak from quite a high level of expertise when it comes to climate change and adaptation, because I'm really on the front line here. Because I don't have mains water, I'm very aware of the water levels in the soil. I'm very aware of rain. I'm very aware of how much water my spring well has left in it to be able to just gravity feed the cottage. I grow a reasonable amount of food for myself. I grow an enormous amount of food for the wildlife. I don't have much of the electrical items that people in general in the West have. I don't have a washing machine or a tumble dryer or a bath or a toilet. I have my toilet taken out, I have a compost toilet. So I'm sort of on that frontline edge. I'm very well aware of what's happening. I'm also optimistic. And anyway, I'll just take you down to where I was working and I'll show you. So, again, those of you who are familiar with Bealtaine Cottage will know about the famous chop and drop. So you can see there's a fair bit of chop and drop has gone on here. Chopping and dropping preserves the moisture in the soil, okay, because you're covering the soil. There's a little bird down on the steps there. So, what I've been doing, I've been opening up this pathway, which of course is the steps, and I've got a lot more pruning to do, but you remember last autumn, well, it was sort of winter really, and I planted 7 more trees into what was the remaining bit of lawn. So this is what I do with the chop and drop, because these are young trees. Now, I was reading lots of comments online about the planting of 350 million trees in Ethiopia and how many of them wouldn't survive. Chopping and dropping helps young trees survive on several different levels, and I'm going to talk you through it. So what we have here is 4 birch trees, and I'm piling up, literally piling up stuff that I've cut, and ideally you chop each piece to about 6 to 10 inches, something like that, and then just drop it. It's not imperative, it's ideal. So you can see now what I've done. I've gone in round the new trees. Look, 1, 2, 3. I've tramped the grass down around them, and then I've started the chop and drop. And the same here with these 4 birch trees. Let me see, if I just crouch down a little bit, you'll be able to see the trees better. Probably, yeah. Okay. Now I've got a lot more to cut back, and I'm literally just bringing it into this area, chopping, dropping, leaving the 2 little paths open, and this will help to keep all the moisture in the soil. It's a great thing to do during the winter and also during the spring, but at this part of the summer I think it's quite important, because the ground really has dried out. Even here at Bealtaine Cottage, everywhere's dry. So chopping and dropping around young trees will help to keep the moisture in the soil, will help to feed the trees by feeding the soil, will create habitat piles around the young trees, so there's lots of beneficial insects will overwinter in there, will help the trees during the winter because there's quite a lot of protection from the harshest of the weather, and I'm not really talking now about snow, I'm talking about rain. Because you can plant trees, and because the soil around them is quite loose and does remain loose for a while, you know, up to about a year, until those roots start to really get enmeshed into the soil. Harsh rain, which is what we're having now, can wash away the soil around the roots, slightly dislodging the tree, and then when you get a strong wind, the tree can blow over. Now this is something that I've been doing for the past 15 years. And again, it was something that was born out of necessity rather than design. I couldn't afford to import bark chippings and compost and stuff. I've had to build up the soil here through making compost. And of course, to make compost, you have to wait for things to grow. You have to start to get an excess, because you can't make enough compost for an area like this, which is 3 acres, solely by what's left from preparing vegetables or whatever, in the kitchen. So to be able to grow the biomass, which is why I say plant like your life depends upon it, because it does. Planting anything, allowing anything to grow, will give you a harvest for chop and drop, or for compost, or just for covering the soil. I don't cover the soil with plastic anymore. I did that in the early days. And I prefer to keep feeding the soil, which is what I've done here. So I will be continuing this chop and drop, and you'll see then, as the months progress, you'll see what will turn out to be 2 kind of islands of abundance, because all this will biodegrade down and start making the trees look quite happy and embedded. So, adaptation is something that we'll all have to get very savvy with very quickly. And there will be parts of the world, there will be parts of Mother Earth where it's just going to be impossible to do anything, because the land has been so ravaged by humankind. Corporations and big farming. No wonder they call it agriculture. Because it can be extremely aggressive. I'm talking about the big farmers, okay? I think small farming is going to be where it's at. And the continual observation, this is where permaculture can teach us some things, not all things, but some things. Because permaculture is essentially, from my perspective, about close observation of the earth and all life therein. When you come to understand how things work, what works best. I'm just after watching a bee whiz past me, and literally, it's kind of following these path lines. Don't know if any of you have noticed that with the birds and the bees and the insects here. They actually fly along. They navigate the paths. It's quite endearing to watch. Little corridors of plenty. So, it's been hot, it's been hard work. There's the boy there sitting down in the cool. He always clocks himself not too far from me, which I'm always very happy about. But you can see, looking in here amongst the trees, the fruits of 15 years chop and drop. Because we've got some beautiful, earthy, rich soil building up. And of course very much protected by trees and protected by chop and drop piles, which in turn become habitat piles, like this one. This one's a lovely one because it's from the bamboo. And I'm sick to death of people saying, but bamboo's invasive, you can't plant This is another mantra of mine now, because I've said it so often, I'm sort of repeating myself, so it's become a mantra. There's no such thing as invasive species. I mean, how dare we human beings talk like that? we're the ones who invade everywhere. There's no such thing as invasive species. There are only people who refuse to engage with Mother Earth. And I do believe that we're here to serve her, and in serving her, we serve ourselves very well. So being able to go in there and harvest bamboo and create a big habitat pile, which as it biodegrades, feeds the earth, feeds Mother Earth and creates more earth. We cannot then in turn say that's an invasive species. So if something grows well and someone says to you, oh, that's invasive, but it's growing well, then simply go in and keep harvesting it and use it as a biomass to feed Mother Earth with, or to put on your compost heap, or to do what I'm doing here, which is to protect and feed and mulch young trees. An essential part of adaptation. Because we can be like King Canute and go down to the tidal line and try to drive the tide back. That's not going to happen. We're not going to be driving anything back. But we do have to be intelligently engaged with this and see it as an ongoing task, and a task that bears fruits very quickly. Did you see that little butterfly flying over my head down the path? The boy's up there now. So I've also just been, again, just keeping the paths open and just chopping, dropping. It looks messy for a week or so, and then it very quickly turns into woodland path. So I've got a wheelbarrow load of stuff to take round to the compost heap. I had to do a bit of pruning along the fuchsia hedge here, simply because there's going to be a lot of very heavy rain starting Monday, apparently. And it was getting difficult climbing out of the car and all the overhanging growth. And of course, when it rains, this will really hang down low. So I've done a bit of pruning along here, but of course, leaving as many flowers on the fuchsia as possible. Look, and there's a bee saying thanks. And prune some bits as well off the Great Western Cedar, which I will put through the shredder, and that's going to be used then for the compost loo. Cleaned my car last night. I used a basin of it's quite interesting. I used a basin of what had been rainwater from that barrel there. So there was soap in it. So I washed it. I used a soft hand brush, you know, the little brushes that you'd use, you know, dustpan and brush. So I washed it, and then using that jug, I then used just jugs of water, stage by stage, to pour over the car to get rid of the suds. And I think you'll agree, it's done a fantastic job, look. So, you know, why would you have a hose on? Because you see a lot of people washing cars with hoses, and the hoses are going and the water's going everywhere. Water's very precious, That's certainly something that I've learned over the past few years. Because, like I say, I've always kept a journal to do with, outside, the earth, the garden, the growth. And I can remember here when there was no drought. I've only been here 15 years, but the first 5 or 6 years there was no drought to speak of. Over the past 10 years, it started with 1 drought during the summer. Last year and the year before there were 2. This year, this is the 3rd. So this year there's been 3. So if the west of Ireland is experiencing droughts during the summer, and most people, as I say, are unaware of it because they're on mains water, but if the west of Ireland is experiencing droughts, then it's time we started adapting as quickly as possible. And adaptation at this point isn't about, saving the planet. Mother Earth isn't going anywhere. People are so egotistical and arrogant. They say, oh, we've got to save the planet. No, we don't. Mother Earth replenishes herself. What we have to do is enable her to do it. In other words, we've got to stop. We've got to stop treating our Mother Earth like a bottomless pit of resources. Every mother has her breaking point. And for those who say, oh, it's too late for us, we've dug our own grave. Shame on you. Shame on you. If what I've done here saves a few insects, a few birds and a few bees, I have lived a good life. Simple as that. So it's not what you do for yourself, it's what you do for Mother Earth. So that's it. Well, on this particular aspect anyway, there's so many levels I could talk about. But what I try to do is just to sort of bring them into the conversation slowly, I don't think preaching is going to help anyone. In fact, I don't think preaching is going to help at all. Got some rather nice onions out of the bed there. Got some there, and I got some more onions up that end. Now, considering that I haven't put any water in these beds, they're holding in well. I will put a little bit of water now in the celery. Try to keep that going. And of course I've already decided that when the plastic goes in the tunnel, I will not be replacing it because the tunnel is just too hot to even go in at the moment. Look at the beautiful butterfly there. I'm delighted that there's lots of butterflies now out and around Bealtaine, and I do believe that that's because of all the good habitation that's been provided for them. And I'll just say one more thing actually. I was just picking up a few leaves the other day out the back near the veranda on the lodge, and so I kind of was picking them up and I thought, oh, I'll just put these into the wheelbarrow. And there was this beautiful butterfly. It was exactly the same colour as the leaves, so it was obviously sort of hiding itself, sort of semi-hibernating in a way. And I had a very interesting conversation then with my daughter, and I said, look, in the past, do you know that we've, gardeners cleaned up leaves and burned them. Hey ho, that's the last thing anyone should be doing. A lot of insects, butterflies, moths, hibernate in leaves, and to pick them up and say, well, I'll pick them up then and put them into a black plastic sack. You get a lot of gardening books saying, oh, you can put them into a black plastic sack and tie up the sack and then you'll have lovely mulch. What about the insects that are in there? We do need to think outside the box, outside of our own heads, and what it is that we need. Because when we start thinking of others, that's when we begin to see the bigger picture. Anyway, oh look, some of the berries are actually turning red. What a beautiful sight. So blessings to you all.